Hey, if you're as passionate about knives as I am, you're in exactly the right place. Welcome to Read About Knives. We talk about all kinds of knives, and today we're going to talk about something a little bit different. Today we're going to talk about folding knives. The title of this video was Tricky Trio, and I promise we're going to get into that tricky trio. The pocket knife is probably the knife that more people carry than anything else. It's a knife that's used for a lot of different things. It's something you can just slide in your pocket. It's always ultra handy. You can use it out in the woods, use it out in the farm. You actually see them being used in the office. And in some cases, the pocket knife is so fancy that it's used as pocket jewelry. A nice pocket knife gets there. It's the kind of thing that when you pull out to cut a piece of string or to open an envelope or whatever that purpose is, up to and including maybe cutting your steak if you go to a nice steakhouse and they give you that usual meat saw, that ugly thing with the jagged edges on it. It gives you an opportunity to do it. You know, to myself personally, one of the reasons I so enjoy using a sharp knife is when I'm cutting that nice steak or that nice pork chop and just drawing the blade across that meat and watching it just part, almost like it's afraid of touching the blade. To me, it's a thing of wonder, and I very, very much enjoy it. Pocket knives have a great history. They go way, way back, and up to the modern age where people are still working on trying to find the right lock to use on their knives. Today we're going to talk about some of those, and I'm going to show you a little bit of the history. Probably the first knife, and this is one that I made up myself because I had a blade laying around, is called the friction folder. And what that is a knife really without any lock whatsoever. Often there's a little bit of a tail to it. Right here you'll see the tail to that friction folder. And essentially the knife opens. This one I have to put a spring tab on because I made this handle out of leather, just something to play with and see because I had the leather working background. You'll simply open the knife, and that little tab on the back is how the knife is held open. You actually hold the knife in and it's held open while you're doing it. It's a very simple knife. You make a handle that's comfortable, put a slot in it, some sort of a pivot screw, the tail on there. I'm amazed that I don't see more guys who forge knives actually making friction folders simply for the old-timey aspect of them. But it's kind of a cool knife, and I mean, it goes back, and that's really where pocket knives originated. They were basically friction folders. It's a way to fold it up, put the knife in your pocket. You don't have to worry about getting cut by the edge because it's being protected by the knife. So that's the friction folder. It's really a very simple device. We're going to get down into some other knife locks and knife systems because this is where really the mechanical interest comes into these knives. But a word before we get into that, I want to talk about my opinion as far as locks go. There's a couple of locks that aren't really locks, and we're going to talk about those as well. But we're going to start right now with talking about the very basic one. First one we're going to talk about is one of the locks that I was telling you about, which is a little bit controversial. I get a little bit controversial with it because people call it a lock. They'll argue about it being a lock. The reality is it's not. I consider it to be more of a wedge than a positive lock. Okay, that's called the liner lock. Now this is a Victorinox rescue tool, and the reason I chose it really is because you can see the lock and see the way the lock operates better on this than you will anything else. Let me see if I can get it to where the light, well, you'll see it. But actually as the blade opens, okay, there's a lock right here. Okay, this is called the liner lock. This locking piece right here, which is a little bit of a stud right there. As the knife opens, what it does is the lock pops out. You heard it pop. And what it does, if you'll look, is this tab has swung out to impinge upon the blade closing. Okay, that's called a liner lock because it's inside the liner of the knife. To unlock it, you'll push the liner out of the way and fold the knife because now it's out of the way from impinging the knife closing, and it sits out there. That's the liner lock. You can always hear them click if they're good ones. Okay, and the blade's not going to close. Push the liner out of the way and it closes very easily. That's called a liner lock. It's a very simple machine. It works quite well. It's quick. It's easy to manufacture. Obviously, this is a Victorinox knife, so it's going to be a very good piece. This is the rescue tool. It's pretty cool. It's got a shackle on it for turning on hoses, things along those lines. Okay, so that's a liner lock. Okay, now A close relative to the liner lock is called, I got the wrong knife, here we go, is called the frame lock. Now this knife, as you see, the frame is metal here. It's a full metal here. But what's interesting about a frame lock is that right along here, you'll see where that separation is. This is actually the lock. And when the knife opens, you'll see how the lock works there. When the knife opens, the lock pops across. Okay, I don't know if you saw that. We'll do it again. It actually pops across, much like a liner lock will, except it's on the outside. And when it pops out, it's going to be down here. Okay, when the knife locks, what's going to happen is that spring jumps out, as you saw it right along the bottom here. We'll do it again. It pops out and wedges the knife from closing. Okay, liner locks are considered to be stronger than frame locks are considered to be stronger than liner locks because the spring is a little bit beefier and bigger, therefore more of it impinges on the blade. But once again, we're talking about what I call a wedge rather than a lock, because if you were to push hard enough on it, it's possible for that little locking wedge right there to slide out of the way, or to get pushed out of the way, and the knife closes on you anyway. Now, I've always wondered about knives closing on somebody when they're cutting, because in reality, I mean, the knife kind of tells you which way it's supposed to work. The edge is supposed to be what you're cutting. So I've never really understood what you'd be doing with a knife to be pushing it towards closing. If you spend a lot of time working with slip joints, you kind of learn that. You're supposed to be cutting towards the edge. I don't really know what you're supposed to be trying to do with the spine of the knife, but that's basically how they work. So this is what's known as a frame lock. Now, like I said, frame locks are very popular. You'll see those on knives. I think the frame lock was made popular by the Sabenza. Very expensive knife, but very strong, very durable. Titanium handles, so it's light and comfortable and tough. Okay, this is called a frame lock. All right, the last lock we're going to talk about as far as the basic locking, we have obviously the liner lock and the frame lock, neither of which is, in my opinion, a true lock. What you have is you basically have the two parts that come together and butt together to lock up. Now, so when you're opening it up, the frame lock is coming in from the side and locking together. The problem with that is if you press hard enough, what can happen is that the locking tab can get pushed in or out. Let's push it in. It gets pushed in, and then the blade can actually overrun it because you're only catching a section of the blade. Okay, in the lock, it can slide off. So you've heard me say it, I call them a wedge. Now, a frame lock is a completely different setup. A frame lock, you have a locking lug and a locking lug. You actually have a locking lug that drops in and they interlock like your fingers, so you cannot pull them out. Okay, and you actually have to lift by pushing down the back lock. It's pivoted up out of the way so that the blade can function down there. Let me show you what that really looks like. I've got some pieces of blade here, so let's look at how that works. Okay, I've got a couple of pieces of knife here. I took apart a cheap Chinese knife that I had laying around. They don't take apart the good ones like this because there's really no way to take apart a backlock knife without destroying it in the process or having to go through a hassle to put it back together. It's just not going to happen. They're generally riveted together and done the right way. So on the blade itself, what you have is you have a notch right here. Okay, that notch is where it drops in, and then you actually have the locking piece, the locking lug right there. Okay, so the blade will come in and lock on that. Now the mating piece for the actual lock itself is much the same. Okay, here's our pivot point back here, so it pivots on that. And what you have is you have the clearance notch for the blade to drop into, and then the actual lock, the locking tab that drops in. So when you pivot the blade out of the way, what happens is it comes up out of the way, and then the blade can go right past it. Okay, but it's a full-fledged lock. When you open it, they pop together and lock together. It's very strong, very solid. It's interlocking like my fingers were. The real benefit to that is that the lock is the full width or full thickness of the blade when it comes together. So you got a lot more metal there. It's much more solid, and it's not like it can't really overrun. Now, the only problem I've found with back locks is it's a pocket knife. It's going to be in your pocket, and pocket lint and all that crud's going to get in there, and it's going to get trapped in the bottom of this notch. And that's going to prevent the lock from being a full lock. But you can tell that's happening because when you open it, you don't get the snap of the two pieces coming together. Let me grab a knife that's intact so we can do that. I've got a nice Spyderco here. Very nicely made knives. I like Spydercos as well. You put your thumb in and open it. Now you can see, here's the lock right here. And you can see that when I start to open it, you'll see the actual lock gets cammed up. You can see how this piece gets cammed up here. Okay, it gets cammed up and the button has gone in. Now when a knife comes fully open, because it's clean, it doesn't have the crud in there, you get that nice secure click. When it comes time to close the knife, you press in, okay, and it's clear, and you'll see that how it clears, and then it opens in. So if I can show you the edge of the knife here, you'll see when the lock comes together, okay, here's the lock right here. When the lock comes together, it forms one solid bar across. And you're talking about the full thickness of the blade locking it together. That's a back lock. And to me, that is a very, very secure locking system for a pocket knife. Since we're talking about locks on knives, there's really two left that we haven't talked about. One is locks on bagels. We're not going to get into that. Sorry, it just makes me hungry when we talk about that. You know, a nice onion bagel, some cream cheese, a little bit of lox, a slice of onion, some tomato. Man, you're eating good. But no, we're not going to get into that. The other one is the oldest of the locks, as far as I know, other than the friction folders, which don't have a lock. The other one was invented in 1890. It's been around for a very long time. It's still around. It's still being made. As of, I believe, 1990, there was a modification made to it to give you an idea of how good this lock was. It carries all the way through. If you haven't figured out from the date and what we're talking about the Opinel. And the Opinel is a really very interesting knife. Everybody has one. If you don't, you really should. They're just an amazing little knife. They're great. I know Opinel made a number of different sizes. As I understand it now, Opinel has gotten to where the only one they're making is the number 8. They come in a number of different sizes, or did come in a number of different sizes, going all the way down to the number 1, which was absolutely tiny. It was smaller than a pen knife. I know that was the first one that they dropped because they felt it was too small to be reasonable. I think the big one was the number 18, which was way too big. Nobody would carry it. Nobody would use it. It's a pocket knife. The one that survived is the number 8. This one is in the color. These are painted. They're a very basic knife. They're made out of wood. Often it's a birch wood. They did make them and do make them in like olive and oak and so forth. Very basic knife. It's set up to it's got the wooden shape. There's a trademark now on the shape of the butt on this. They consider it to be a trademark. Anyway, it's a simple blade. The blade opens. You twist the lock, which we'll get into here in a second. You just turn it and the knife is locked open. These are great to have in camp. They're also great for kids as a first knife. I always recommend them as a first knife for kids because so often when people are looking for a folding knife for their kid, they think, okay, kid's got little hands, so we should get them a little knife. And I always steer people away from that because I think you got it wrong. Little hands are also young hands, and those young little hands don't have the manual dexterity. And you give them a little knife, and it's a formula for the kid to get cut. And usually it's mommy that's the one that takes it away. Kids seem to get cut and they just figure that's cool. But mommy is upset. She forgets the kids are self-sealing. You know, the blood just stops flowing eventually because the cut heals up. It's not a big deal. But to me, an Opinel makes a lot more sense for a child because it is big. There's plenty for his hand to hold on to. And with the Vibrolock, it makes the knife very safe. Let's show you, let's talk about the Vibrolock because it is a rather interesting if you haven't seen it. And if you have, they're cool. So let's take a look at the Vibrolock from an Opinel. All right, I'm going to switch knives here though to talk about it because the Opinel, this one's rather small. It's difficult to really get a good clear image on it. This is a Twist Master made by Cold Steel, and it is a large Opinel. Here's the twist lock. Here's your standard Opinel to give you an idea. It's a good size knife. They're cool. They're also kind of hard to find, but it's good to see because we can look at this and get a good grasp on how it works. The Vibrolock is this rotating collar right here. It rotates to give you, to basically make the lock. You manually open it, and what you do, if you look in the Vibrolock, you'll see here, you got a nice clean area for the blade to swing down into. You can swing the blade up. And where the Vibrolock comes in is that you rotate the collar. And by rotating the collar, you're actually blocking off that groove. So here it is locked, and here it is open. You notice the groove all the way across there, and you lock it in. That blocks the blade from closing, and it makes a pretty secure closing. Now, you can't beat on it. You're just not going to, but it's a very interesting way to do it. It gives you a knife that's portable and safe. Now, around 1990, one of the Opinel family, because this is still a family-run business, came up with the idea that in addition to be able to open the knife and twist it to lock it open, which makes sense, is that when it's in your pocket, because as you use these, they tend to get looser, they wear and they get a little bit loose, is when the knife is closed, you can twist it. I don't know if you can see this really well here. Cameras just don't always get it so well. But if you twist it the other way, it wedges the knife closed so that you can't open it. So it locks open and it locks closed. If you buy a new Opinel, that's how you're going to find them. One of the other cool things I've always liked with Opinels is that they're customizable. Years ago, we had a knife group and we talked about our knives, and Opinels always came up as camp knives. And what a lot of us did, we actually got into almost like a competition of customizing our Opinels. Because it's wood, it can be sanded and shaped differently. This is one that I ended up making for myself. It's a lot slimmer because I had flattened down the edges. Sandpaper does a great job for that. I rounded off the butt to make it a little bit more convenient to carry. Instead of that big peak at the back here, mine is rounded off. Okay, to make it lower, I changed the blade by grinding it slightly and working it over. I made it into a drop point rather than a clip point blade. This is a pretty handy little knife. This is one of my favorites. This has spent a lot of time in my pocket. It's worn pretty smooth, and it's neat. Opinel makes a number of different designs. This is the traditional one. They have mushroom knives and gardening knives and so forth. This is a fillet knife that they do, which is pretty neat as well. These I used to keep in the cook box in the campsite because there you have your steak knife. You also have a vegetable knife, a paring knife, and so forth. These are pretty handy. They're one of the things that people who have them, we always notice is how sharp they get, how well they sharpen up, and how usable they are. The reason for that is obviously the blades are very, very thin, but they get razor sharp. I mean, a little bit of sharpening. And first it has to do with the steel more than anything else. It is thin, so it has good blade cutting geometry. But the carbon steel blades, which are getting harder to find because they don't make carbon steel anymore, the carbon steel blades are $10.95. so it takes a good edge. It holds it reasonably well. They work great. The stainless steel is 12C27. They're not a cheaply made junk knife, but the locking system is what really makes them very attractive to me. Often when I go camping, and we used to go camping, I would always throw them in my pack. I'd throw a handful of them in my pack. I'd keep a couple. Because when you go out, invariably somebody forgets to bring his knife, and they come over, hey, can I borrow your knife? You're not borrowing my knife. You know, I mean, borrowing a man's knife is like borrowing his wife. It's just not happening. Because you're going to get it back. It's going to be broken. It's going to be damaged. They're going to lose it. Whatever it is, they're not going to treat it well because it's not theirs. So you don't get it. You know, you come to me and say, hey, I got a problem. You know, I forgot my knife. Can I borrow yours? I'll go to my pack, pull it out, and go, there you go. Use that. Here's how it works. They go ahead and cut it, end of the camp out. If they remember to return it, they'll walk over to return it to me. And generally, I'll just say, you know what? Keep it. It's yours. Throw it in your pack. You won't be without a knife again. Okay, here's Reed's Tricky Trio. The reason I call them tricky is there's 3 knives here that are quite unique in the way they lock and in the way they open. They're also not cheap. A lot of guys over the years, one of the tricks always has been, one of the goals always has been with knife designers is, let's make one that is easy to open, is very secure. In most cases, in these 3 cases, one of the goals was to actually make knives that you could open one-handed that would be very secure. So we're going to talk about these 3 knives. The first one I'm going to talk about is one of my favorites. It's a knife that I've always thought of as a perfect pocket knife. This is called the Paul knife. Gerber made these for a number of years. Since Gerber gave it up, the patents and so forth, other people bought rights to it, and they've made them. There have been a couple other manufacturers. I think Lone Wolf made them for a while. It's a very cool knife. It's called the Paul knife because it was designed by a man named Paul Pullman. Paul was an aerospace engineer, and you can see that in the knives that there's a lot of very great, very interesting engineering. It is truly a one-handed knife. The other thing is I think Paul wanted to be able to carry it with him because if you look at how slim it is and actually how small it is, it's a very handy knife. You can see sliding this in the pocket, although when you got these from Gerber, they usually came in a little belt pouch, but I've always just slipped mine in my pocket. It's just a very cool knife. The Paul knife is unique and it has a tremendous amount of engineering in it because it's basically, there's a button on the side right here, and by pressing in the button, it unlocks the knife. So you can hold the knife this way, pinch the button, and give it a little shake, and the blade actually opens. Okay, give it a little bit more of a push, and it's wide open. And there's a lock. This one has a little bit of dust in it. There we go. And you end up with an opened up Paul knife. These are very cool. They're very lightweight. I like them a lot. The lock mechanism is fascinating, how it works, and I'll probably be doing a video about the Paul knife itself. I don't recommend you take it apart. You can. I've taken mine apart. I will take this one apart for this video so you'll actually get to see the insides of it and actually how it works. In fact, there's a reason to subscribe and click that alert button. Again, you remember that button right over here? You know, click that alert button after you subscribe. So when it comes out, you'll know it's out and you can see it because I will take it apart and you'll get to see how it works. It is kind of a marvel. It's a marvel at how simple it is because it appears to be complicated to think about how it works and how strong the lockup is on it. Okay, to close the knife, again, pinch that button in and the handle swings up and it locks in. Okay, let you hear it. Okay, they are, like I said, they are a terrific little knife. This is one of my favorites. This is a Paul knife. Like I said, tricky knives. This is pretty tricky. It's different. This is a knife that somebody can pick up and have to fiddle around and try to figure out how to open it. So it's your knife. You know, they'll leave it alone. It's kind of cool to do that. Another knife in the tricky trio is the Rolox by Benchmark, not Benchmade, Benchmark. And the Rolox is a very different way of going about it, and again, an interesting mechanism. Rather than like all knives where the blade swings out, the idea behind the Rolox was that the blade actually slides forward. Go this way. Okay, it actually slides forward. Okay, and it's locked in. It doesn't swivel back. There's a lock on the bottom that actually comes up and blocks the blade from sliding back, the full width of the blade to prevent it from sliding back. When you want to close it, just like a back lock, we got this little tab right here. Okay, when you want to close it, you press that tab, lift the tip of the blade up, so now it's slid back. I'll give you a little hint, it's on tracks. It slides back, spring loads, and locks in. Okay, now this one is sandbar stag, so it's mine. You know that because Reed always loves sandbar stag. They came with a lot of different handles. They actually made plastic handled versions or rubberized plastic or whatever that would have been. Again, that was a Rolox. They're a cool knife. They really are. They're a bit more slim. This one's a little bit big for me to carry in the pocket. This one, I guess, would get a belt pouch, but if I had a Viper, rubber handled ones, I would carry in my pocket. Again, they are susceptible to pocket lint. Another one that I promise I will get a video on this. I will shoot the video and I'll take it apart so you can see it and understand how it works and see how clever the design is. I think that's part of the fascination I have with knives. Probably something you share as well is the fascination with knives is how different mechanisms work, how different shapes, how different sizes, really how different they are. Okay, so this is the Benchmade Rolox. So now we've got 2 out of the 3. The third is the king as far as I'm concerned. In case you've never seen one, that is a Berry Wood. Okay, it's a Berry Wood number 2. The Berry Woods are super elegant. Again, the design, once the patents ran out, the design was copied. Berry Wood made them. His son, Mike Erie, got involved. They became Wood Erie. When Berry finally retired, Erie took it over, and then a lot of people jumped on them. There were copies made in Italy, a lot more inexpensive copies. Pacific Cutlery, PCC, made a run of them with metal handles. They're all cool, and they all work exactly the same way. This knife is absolutely impossible to close up on you while you're working with it, and I'll show you why. The way this works is in the back you pinch, and the handles, when they're unlocked, it's hard to show you pinch it because my fat hands will be in the way. When it unlocks, the handle starts to swing down out of the way. So the handle swings down. You'll see how the blade's coming out now. So we've got the handle, we've got this handle, we've got this handle, and what they do is they swing and then lock together. Okay, so you have a very stable, very sturdy knife. I've always liked the Paul knives, the Berry Wood knives, because they do have a certain elegance about them that I just find fascinating. They're beautiful knives. In fact, when I was hand making fixed blade knives, I copied the handles after that. Anyway, so we have, like I said, I kept my promise. There's our tricky trio of knives. They are very neat. Generally, the knives you'll see in my videos are for sale in the shop as well. Everything but the tricky trio are for sale. My wife fell in love with these. She's already forbidden me to sell them, but you can find them, and they're cool. They really are cool. So that about wraps it up with the knives. We've covered our tricky trio. Pocket knives are very cool, very interesting. Tell me about, in the comments down below, tell me about your favorite pocket knife. Let's talk about them. Tell me which ones I missed as far as locks go. That'd be an interesting thing. Also in the comments, a bit of an announcement. We are going to have a new mascot on here. We're going to have a shop dog. I've never had to shop without a dog, and unfortunately, I had to replace the last one. Still getting over being sad about him. So we're getting a new one. I'm getting a Labradoodle, the standard Labradoodle. It'll be a worthy replacement. I'm going to need some help from you guys. I need a lot of help with this. We need to come up with a name for him. So if you have an idea for a name, put it down in your comments. Let's find out what the shop dog's name is. The two we had before, my previous two shop dogs, one was Gonzo and one was Guido. I'm thinking I kind of want to stick with the G names just out of reverence for the two, his two predecessors that were both great dogs. The names I'm trying to lean toward are similar as far as the name goes, starting with a G, a vowel afterwards. We had Gonzo, G-O, Guido, G-U. They both ended with an O. So I'm thinking G, vowel, and ending in a vowel. So we got Gonzo, we had Guido. We need a name for the new shop dog. Put that down in your comments. Give me a hand naming the dog. Again, subscribe if you like this content. Even if you don't like it, subscribe. Okay, subscribe. Give me those likes. Those likes are really very important for the algorithm. Comments are important for the algorithm. Definitely hit that alerts bell. Let me know. Thanks for stopping. Appreciate it. And we're out of here.